All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for visiting my YouTube channel back. My name is Professor Gavala. And today I have a really good friend of mine. Me and him met when we did an internship back 2 years ago now, right?
Yeah, about
Um,
2.5 years ago, something like that. Yeah.
yeah. And today I just kind of want to talk to you about your experience as an electrical engineer, and then just get different insights for anyone that's curious about joining this workforce or this work field, and just talk more about that. So, if you want to just introduce yourself really quickly. Mhm.
Hello, everybody. My name is Juan Rodriguez. I am the automotive business lead for clocks and timing products with Texas Instruments. And yeah, appreciate you having me on, Dema, Professor Dema.
Yeah, sounds good. So let's just dive right into it. What made you choose engineering, specifically electrical engineering, right? Am I saying that correctly? You're electrical engineer, right?
Right. So growing up, I was always pretty good at the applied sciences, the applied mathematics, that being anywhere from like statistics or physics or anything like that. So I knew that I wanted to get into engineering going into college just because that's where I could best apply my skills. Um, and I knew that I wanted to do engineering because I wanted to get into a profession that you could start out with good pay without needing to go, for example, medical school or for like law school, doing 4 years of undergrad and then having to go to school again just to get another degree so that you could actually do your profession. So I think engineering made the most sense. And when I was going to high school, keep in mind I graduated high school about 2017. Um, the whole everybody was raving about computer science and programming and software. So when I got into college, I went to the University of Florida, by the way. So I grew up in Florida,
Oh,
and
nice.
I had applied to a variety of schools. I was really trying to shoot big, and I got into. I'd say the best school I got into was University of Chicago, but
Nice.
ultimately Florida just made the most sense financially, and it also a really good school too. So when I got into Florida, I wanted to be a computer engineer, and that's what I started at as my first semester. After I took that first intro to programming course, and I already had a little bit of a background in software. We took some computer science classes in high school, and we did some projects um, in the clubs and whatnot.
Mhm.
But once I took that first computer science class, the intro to programming, that's when I decided that I didn't really like the software side. I just thought, well, for starters, I wasn't very good at it, but also I if I put in the work, I would have still came out with a degree, but
Yeah.
I didn't feel like for the rest of my life I wanted to sit at a computer and primarily only work on software, whether that be writing it or reviewing it or drawing up the system for it. It's not something I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And with computer engineering, the beauty of it is that at my school, it was a mix of both computer science and electrical engineering. So I knew that if I switched to electrical engineering, I'd still be all the classes that I took would still count towards my major. I wouldn't
Exactly.
have to
Mhm.
delay it uh, any semesters or anything like that. I still graduate on time. And electrical engineering was a little bit more appealing because it was more like hands-on. Um, And yeah, and I had heard that at least when I was going to school, electrical engineering was one of the hardest engineering majors. And I felt that if I was able to do the work and graduate with it, uh, I would be able to apply to different types of roles, not necessarily electrical engineering roles, but anything else that I really wanted to do, just because it's recognized as a difficult major. So people can understand that you can apply yourself and you're willing to put in the work to get results.
Yeah, 100%. I myself, I do agree with that in terms of like electrical engineers can do anything they put their minds to. It is a hard degree, it is a hard major, but once you get out, like the world is yours pretty much. So that's interesting. I never knew that you started off as a computer engineer and then switched over, or computer science, and then switched over to electrical engineer.
Yep, yep, that's
Yeah.
exactly what happened.
Okay, that sounds good. And one of the things that a lot of people are scared about, like going into the field, is the studies, like in terms of it being very hard, or like just like the passive notion of like electrical engineering, like circuitry, design, simulation can be very, very overwhelming. How did you tackle that as a student in terms of like tell yourself, okay, I'm gonna strive to be great. I'm gonna strive to do all my assignments. Just overall as a student, how did you tackle that?
Well, it was difficult to start with, especially coming out of high school. I feel like the classes were came pretty easy, and I'd be able to wait to a couple weeks before a test to really start trying to learn the material, and I'd still kill it. Um, and once you get to college, everybody tells you it's different, but you're coming out, you have a little bit of an ego, and I'm taking these classes and I'm thinking it's all going to be the same. But the difference is in college, you have exams after every 2 months, pretty much, or either an exam or a paper. And it's a lot more
Mhm.
difficult to prepare for those exams with 6 chapters, 7 chapters of material. Um, and additionally, the concepts that you're learning in class or in lab or whatever it may be uh, are 1,000 times more challenging than anything you saw in high school. And it's more difficult to get help because at least in your freshman and your sophomore year, you're taking these quote unquote weed out classes. So you're in big auditorium rooms with hundreds and hundreds of students. It's very hard to get access to the professor. The professors have their office hours, which is great, and they have teaching assistants, which also have office hours, which is also great. But it's not quite like your your high school teacher where you always have access to them no matter what, or even during lunchtime, you can go see them if you have a question, or during the class if you have a question, they're going to take the time to help you out. in
Mhm.
in college, it was like you're there for 50 minutes, you're there for 45 minutes, and the entire time you're just in lecture, you have to listen. They're going to ask if you have questions, they're going to encourage you to ask questions, they're going to do their best to answer. But at the end of the day, I found a lot of times when I would ask questions, they would still explain it in terminology that made it difficult to understand. So the best
100%.
thing that I did, I would say when I first started school, there was other people that I already knew that went to Florida, and um, they had suggested this program that I don't know if other schools offer something similar to it, but it's called Study Edge.
Oh,
And
okay.
basically, what that was kids that had already gone to the school had joined this startup company, and they would create study guides, and you would sign up for this service, and it would almost be like having a second professor. But they would do a sometimes they would do a better job of explaining the class than the actual teachers because they would show you little tips and tricks on how you'd be able to solve it. So that was
Mhm.
it. Just because it worked for me doesn't mean it would work for everybody, but for me it was great
Yeah.
because it was another avenue of information that was now coming in, and it was now like I was seeing the material a second or a third time, um,
Mhm.
and it was becoming more familiar. It's easier to digest everything.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely agree with that in terms of like being an electrical engineer, you need different avenues of studying. You can't just rely on the 45-minute or the hour 15-minute class that the professor is trying to cram as much information to you, right? So that's really cool that you guys had that. And I know when I was in school, like right, the big thing that was there, like realistically speaking, was Chegg, right? Um and just also like getting help from senior level students and getting mentors and getting advisors to just try and teach you and try and get you to get through the degree, basically.
And to
um
be honest, the biggest resource once you actually get out of those early classes was
mhm,
the other peers in your class or peers that have already taken the
mhm,
class and passed the class because they're able to also kind of act like you said, like mentors or teach you little tips on how you're able to solve something. And something that I always appreciated, at least from the engineering school, is that the kids would never
mhm.
immediately like give you the answer or give
Yep.
you the
Mhm.
solution that you're looking for. Is they would try to encourage you to solve the problem or encourage you to figure out uh, how to create whatever you were trying to create during lab. Usually, like when I
Mm,
was in my engineering classes, the labs ended up becoming some of the harder classes because you didn't
mhm,
really spend time. You spend time in lecture like covering the material and it's all theoretical. But then once you're actually applying yourself and taking that theoretical material, that's when it became really tough. A lot of
yeah.
students struggle with that. So definitely connecting with the with your peers was a great resource.
Just out of curiosity here, not to put you on the spot, but what was like just really quick, what was your hardest class, do you think? And what was your easiest
Easily
class?
easily digital logic and computer
Okay.
systems.
Oh, okay.
Um, but that class had a reputation. When
Mm,
you enter the electrical engineering degree, everybody that's already taken the class and even your advisor, they're telling you that you're going to struggle in this class no matter what. And
mm,
that's because of the style of teaching. Not to say that the
mhm,
professor wasn't great. He's one of the best professors in the school. And at the
mhm.
time that I took the class, he was the head of the electrical engineering department.
Oh,
Um,
nice. Okay.
but the difficulty in the class, the style in which we had to learn the class, and the style of the exams, it had one of the highest drop rates at the school, not just
Oh,
for
wow.
engineering, just the school in general. So it's kind of like you're already going in and you know it's going to be tough, and you just have to make sure you're not comparing yourself to the other students taking the class because some people are more. Everybody takes in information differently. But you're
Mhm,
kind of going in, and that's one of those classes that once you're going into the exam, you already know you're
mhm.
probably not going to do well on it because nobody really does well on it.
Yeah.
Um, so that was definitely the toughest, and that was the first class where we had to apply both software principles with hardware principles because we did a lot of programming FPGAs,
Mhm.
um, and trying to conceptualize how all of this worked was very difficult, at least for me. And
Nice.
then
Okay.
easiest class was
Yeah.
definitely anything that had to relate with circuits. So whether that be a circuits
Mm.
one, circuits two, or like the
Yeah.
more advanced electronic circuits that went into more transistors,
Mhm,
all of that came easy. That all almost felt like a math problem or even like solving like a puzzle. So I
mhm,
enjoyed those. Those were actually fun to do the homeworks and do the labs. Um,
mhm.
but the digital logic microprocessor
Nice.
applications was another tough one.
Yeah.
Um, and even like friends that I have or friends' little brothers that are coming to the school, I always warn them about those classes too, because everybody
Mm.
struggles. But yeah.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah.
What about
I would
you?
say, yeah, I would say for me, the easiest was anything to do with controls. Let me start with that. Just because I like, so me personally, I think that a class is only as hard as the person that teaches it. Obviously, there's some error there. But like I didn't really have a good professor in when it came to microelectronics. So that was my hardest class. The professor was just not the best. He never really answered the questions when you would ask him. But along the lines, I learned microelectronics by myself in terms of small signal analysis, things like that. And it's actually extremely simple, but it depends on who's teaching it to you, right? So that was my hardest, and my easiest was controls. I really enjoyed controls, control systems. Yeah. Hmm.
Dude, to when you would start a new class and the professor or the TA, whoever's teaching it, has a
Hmm.
very thick accent. And
Yeah.
it just makes it extremely difficult to understand. And they do their
Yeah.
best. And then even if the even worse than that is when they have a thick accent and then when they're drawing on the board or scribbling on the board, it's like
Yeah.
hieroglyphics. Like you can't even read what they're putting on there. But that's when
Yeah,
you
100%.
got to use your textbook. That's why you have textbooks. So yeah.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah. All right. So I want to deviate a little bit because I know Um, a lot of people in engineering, or a lot of people going into engineering, think that engineers, all they do is sit in the lab all day and kind of just read the books, don't really have a social life throughout college. But I know that you were in a fraternity, and I kind of wanted to ask you in terms of balancing that social life and the engineering workload, how that was for you, and what you would, kind of advise people watching this video to do in terms of balancing that again that social and that academic life. Mhm.
So it's a little more unique when you go to a school like Florida because it is in the SEC. It is a Southern school. So once you get there, when you're a freshman, or you do orientation, everybody that you meet, girls, guys, whatever it may be, everybody's asking you, are you going to rush? Were you thinking of rushing? Do you know anybody in this fraternity or in that fraternity? Or the girls are telling you that they like this one or they like that one, or they've heard all these different things about everything. When
Mm-hmm.
I was going into college, I wasn't thinking that I was going to join a fraternity. It wasn't even something I was considering. But it was once I was there, it almost seemed like you had to. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and luckily, I had a friend. I played basketball when I was in high school. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I had a guy that was 2 years older than me that I really respected and I looked up to. And we were good friends too. Uh, I knew that I wanted to go to a fraternity that had a good reputation, not one that was like they're just party animals or they don't treat women well or anything like that. Like somebody that everybody just genuinely likes and they do cool events and everything like that. And it's also just the culture of the people that's in there is motivating. You hold yourselves to a high
Mm-hmm.
standard. So I had a couple friends that went to the school that were older that were in different fraternities, but this particular guy, I knew that if he was in the specific one that I was in Beta Theta Pi, um, that it was going to be a good choice. So when I was in school, after a couple of weeks and asking people around, the opinions that I was getting from other people as well, and then I started meeting people from this fraternity in my classes too. Um, I started getting the vibe that it was what I wanted to do. And then once I was actually in it, during pledging or even after that, when you're just a regular brother, it would become tough sometimes to manage your time to be able to do all the events that you're supposed to do or put in all the hours that you have to put in, and also manage school and manage your relationships outside of the just fraternity like lifestyle, I guess you want to call it, because in when you're in the fraternity, like a lot of times you're talking to people, but outside of the actual house, you still want to have a social life, and it could be with people from the fraternity, or it could be with
Mm-hmm.
anybody else. But you're getting invited to things all the time in college. Everybody, especially people that are not in engineering, have so much time, and they're inviting you to do all these things. So
Yeah.
it could be tough, but at the end of the day, like you have to keep the main thing.
Yeah.
Um, Luckily with my fraternity for the freshmen, when you come in, we do something called study hours, and
Yeah.
every day between 8 to 10 a.m. We usually start lunch. We usually, if I remember correctly, would start serving lunch around 11, and it would
Mm-hmm.
go from 11 to 2. Um, you could be there from 8 to 10 a.m., go in the library, go anywhere you want in the house, and everybody would just be locked in, silent hours. It didn't have to be freshmen, but we
Mm-hmm.
encourage the freshmen to go because the older leaders of the fraternity that had already been taking all these classes, these weed out classes, um, they would be around. We had commitments from them that they would be around to help out with
Yeah.
whatever challenges you may face, answer your questions, try to give you advice on how you should approach certain classes, that sort of stuff. So taking advantage of going to the study hours was great, and it also helps with time management because when you're in this college lifestyle, it's kind of like growing up quickly, where you know that at night and once the sun is setting, it's going to be really tough to focus. Obviously, if you have an exam or a big project coming up, you have to use the night to your advantage. But
Mm-hmm.
if you're living in a dorm or later in your career, if you're living in the frat house or you're living in an apartment with other people,
Yeah.
it can get tough to focus even if you don't have an event going on just because people are hanging out.
Yeah.
Um, so you just have to set your standards. Like I need to get this much work done by this time, and then I'll still have enough time to do other things I want to do, like go to the gym, go socialize, um, watch the game at night, like whatever it may be. Just comes down to time management at the end of the day. And also something that I like to live by, or not even necessarily like to live by, because it's not like I actively think it every day, but that something
Mm-hmm.
that I agree with is you're only as good as your three closest friends. To me personally, I have more than three really close
Mm-hmm.
friends, but um, the people that you surround yourself with are going to shape how you develop growing up,
Yeah.
especially during high school, during college, and in your first couple of years out of college. Um, Coming down to your drive, coming down to your passion and your discipline. Absolutely.
Nice. Yeah, I think that's big. And I also think that in terms of just being in a social like fraternity like you were, looks good in terms of like when you go out to get a job, your employee is gonna know that you're also very social. Because the thing about especially engineers or electrical engineers, we have a tendency to have a stigma that says that we're very timid, we're very shy, we're introverted. So an employee really wants to look for someone who is open, who's open to speak up, uh, who's friendly, who's sociable, plus has the ability to kind of do all the electrical engineering things like the circuit design, the control systems, everything else, project management. So once you have those two things, you're basically unstoppable. So that's really cool that you also were in a frat and you kind of balance that out. And thank you for sharing that.
And I agree with your point, and there's something that people don't really think about. When you're coming out of school, it's very similar to when you were applying to go to these schools. Everybody, like at least for example at UF, everybody you talk to is a valedictorian. Everybody you talk to was in all these clubs in high school. Everybody you talk to had these leadership positions. It's kind of similar when you're applying to jobs out of school, especially if you went to a good school. These companies are receiving so many resumes, so many applicants. They look so similar. Everybody looks qualified. Um, there's things that you have to do to set you apart, and your personality is one of them. A lot of times it gets overlooked. At the end of the day, these employers have to also determine when they're recruiting you that you fit the company's values, that you'd be a good fit for the company, you'd be a good fit for a team. Um, so your character comes into play. Absolutely. Developing those social skills, it doesn't have to be in a fraternity, but wherever it may be is very important for your career moving forward. And also, I mean,
Mhm.
something else that helped me when I was in the fraternity, I took on some leadership positions. I was the vice president at some point, um,
Nice.
which helped with philanthropy and managing money, like showing that I was able to be a leader, which is also
Mhm.
something that these employers look for. And like I said, it doesn't have to be in a fraternity; it can be with any other club that you're passionate about.
Nice. Yeah. No, that's really cool. I commend you for that. Next thing I want to dive into, I want to switch a little bit, talking about more of like the job market once you graduated. Um, what were your strategies when you're trying to apply for these jobs, and what did like your resume look like? Or let me say, what was your strategy in terms of like your pitch and then your resume? Just so anyone who's in the space of looking for a job right now can kind of listen to you and kind of get some advice from you. Yep.
Sure. So, I mean, leading up to when I was applying for jobs, my main priorities over the summer were try to get an internship. If I can't get an internship, then work in a lab over the summer. So I did that after my freshman year and after my sophomore year. I was unable to get internships. It's very tough when you don't have any experience or have taken those higher level classes, especially when you get into these interviews for internships and they start asking you technical questions about things that maybe you kind of heard about or like you've seen like once or twice, but you don't really deal with it on a week to week basis because you're not taking a course that actively um, teaches that sort of material. So what I would do is I did the machine learning lab, I did the wireless and communications lab, and that's
Nice.
almost like a pseudo internship. Even if you're not getting paid, you're getting valuable experience that you can put on your resume of um, working with a team, working on a project, and how you contribute to that project. And that's when I leading up to then when I finally got an internship. Um, I think it was the summer after my junior year. Um, Now I actually have something to talk about, and I have the experience from the courses that I'm now taking, and I have the experience from the interviews that I did in the previous years. And you got to take notes because there's questions that they're going to ask you that other employers are going to ask very similar questions. You got to take notes about things that you got wrong and what's the correct answer, so that you prepare yourself now so that you don't fail. You put yourself in the best position possible. Um, leading up to then, like after you have the internship, after you have the projects working in the labs, now you're making yourself a strong candidate. You have the leadership positions in school, you have the grades, you have the clubs. So now you're making yourself a strong candidate. You need to put yourself in a situation that will help you succeed. And what I mean by that is you need to attend these recruiting fairs, these college fairs that they do, I think every August or September.
Yeah.
It's not just at UF, every school does it. And the bigger the school, the better that these fairs are. So many employers are going there. And the entire reason they're going there is because they're looking for talent.
Hmm.
Um, Leading up to these conferences or these expos, whatever you want to call them, you need to take these seriously, like as if each one is a job interview. Because it really is. When you talk to these recruiters at these different tables, they don't know who you are. They don't know who anybody that's coming up is. Um, and I don't want to say that you have to sell yourself because that's what everybody's doing, but you have to at least practice with your peers, with your friends, maybe like a week or two in advance of how you want to present yourself, not just
Yeah.
in what you're wearing, but how you communicate to when you to the point where you say hello, you and when you want to give them your resume. And at the end of the day, like for example, to get them, you definitely want to get them your resume, but you want to make it natural, not almost like you're making them swallow and eat your resume. It has to be natural. The
Yeah.
goal for when you meet these recruiters is you want it to be a natural conversation. You don't want it to feel like you're interrogating them about the job, and you don't want it to feel like they're trying to pry information out of you. So
Yeah.
practice that leading up to those recruiting fairs, and those recruiting fairs really help. If there's a couple of companies that you're really interested in, um, and you end up hitting it off with those companies, then you're gonna have actual real interviews following up that one that has to do with your character, and then one that has to do more on the technical side, and then maybe you might have one or two more rounds after that, depending on the company or the type of job that you're looking for. So that's what I did, um, which helped gain experience. And I had some job offers on the table because of these recruiting fairs. But
Hmm.
ultimately, I was confident in and secure myself as a strong applicant. So I still applied to so many other companies, even if I didn't get to talk to them at these fairs, because I had so much experience now built up in communicating with these recruiters and kind of giving them like what they want. Um, Not in a natural way, giving them what they want in terms of me being myself.
Yeah.
And once I got um, more interviews with these other companies, and eventually TI became one of those. It was like second nature. Going
Yeah.
from the first interview, that's kind of like an introduction, and they're asking you about your resume and asking you about like challenges that you faced, then more into like technical interviews and then meeting your team and all of that. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's all
Yeah. I
about
think
reps.
Yeah, I think that's very good advice. I think definitely the internship fairs are big. A lot of people, a lot of students in engineering don't go to these things. I when I was in undergrad, I went to all of them, even when I did my master's and everything. Even if I had something lined up, I still went, just like you said, because of the practice. Each interviewer or each interviewer will ask you something different, and that's a opportunity for you to practice your pitch, to practice what you're gonna say during a real interview, um, and that's really good. So I want to next talk about the juicy stuff. So so you currently work at TI right now, right? Can you walk us through two things: the application process in terms of uh, how you like did you do an internship with them and then you got hired on, or did you like apply and got hired on? And then also talk to us briefly about some internship questions that you had, maybe some hard, some easy ones, things like that. Hmm.
Sure. So I did not do an internship with TI. I did an internship with L3 Harris. And then
Hmm.
like prior to that internship with L3 Harris, I had worked in labs at the University of Florida, if I wasn't taking classes over the summer. The internship with L3 Harris was for an electrical engineering position. and it was great. Something else that you can put on the resume. And L3 Harris was really a company that I was looking at working in once I graduated. But ultimately, it came down to me for location. And so I was applying to different places. L3 Harris was based in majority of the opportunities were based in Melbourne, which is where I grew up, Melbourne, Florida, which is also
Mhm.
where my family's at. And personally, I wanted to live by myself, like try to make a life out of myself. And not that I hate my parents, I love my parents, but to like grow up, kind of like become a real adult. Um, so I applied to different places, including TI. And TI also being into one of the most important companies in the world, right? Because they make semiconductors. It also gave me an opportunity to do something where I felt like I was contributing to change, or even contributing to something that the U.S. is proud of. So you see a lot of people that think about TI, and even still to this day, when I meet new people here, and now I live in San Francisco, um, they're like, "Oh, you work for TI? That's like the calculator company." And I asked the same thing in my interview.
Yeah.
Um, and they're like, no, actually, like we do a lot more than calculators. Like calculators are not even 1% of the revenue that we pull in. It's all just chips, different
Wow.
types of chips that we sell to different customers. It's all business to business sales. And TI
Mhm.
is an American-based company, so the U.S. government um, prioritizes it as a company to support. So that was also another driving force and why I wanted to join TI. But going into the interview process, I mean, I can't give you all the sauce, but um,
Yeah, just
but
give us a little taste.
something that you should look up, and not just for TI, but for every company, is the company values. If I remember
Mhm.
correctly, TI has five, um, and they go through. Oftentimes, they go through each value and not directly ask you a question about it, but indirectly ask you a question that would give the interviewer an idea of whether you fit that mold of that value. Because
Yeah.
remember what I said earlier, at the end of the day, they have to find somebody that they think would be a good fit for the company. And what better way for them to find who would be a good fit for the company than literally go through what are the values that this company stands for. So they're going to ask
That's
you
true.
questions like, what's the biggest challenge that you faced in your student career so far, and how did you overcome that? um, and that's not just with TI. It happened with TI, but it happens with so many other companies that I interviewed with. Another one would be they would pick something out on your resume. By the way, if you put something on your resume, make sure you can talk about it, and you know
Yeah.
what you're talking about. Because if
Yeah.
if it's if it's on there, think about it like you're giving like a presentation for your senior report. You have to know everything that's on that slide.
Mhm.
Otherwise, you're just gonna look like a fool.
Mhm.
And if you don't know, then people can tell that you were lying, or you're like stretching the truth, or whatever it may be. So first of
Yeah.
all, make sure everything on your resume is accurate, or if it's not accurate, that you can for sure make it sound like it's accurate.
Mhm.
Um, for me, they asked me about my senior project, so which was great because it was my senior project. So I knew everything that I did from start to finish. I knew what challenges I faced, and that's one of the
Yeah.
things that it's they don't want you to they want you to tell the truth no matter what.
Yeah.
But they
Yeah.
love to hear places or stories in which you had challenges. And each different challenge is a different manner of how you able to tackle problems. That's how
Yeah.
they try to measure your character. And then when it came to like technical style questions, um, there wasn't anything super difficult. If you paid attention in school, for the most part, like you'd be able to answer most of them. A few there usually it's about, I want to say, like 30 minutes are like theory type of questions where they're asking you for definitions, and it can be simple definitions like what is a resistor, what's a capacitor, what's an inductor.
Yeah.
Um, they could also ask you like how would you explain whatever we just talked about in this technical jargon. How would you explain it to somebody that took that was a journalism degree, or like a fifth grader? how would you explain how this works to them?
Yeah.
Because then
Mhm.
they can also see that you're not just regurgitating information, but you're able to process and really understand these concepts.
Mhm.
And they may not ask you like how to do that word for word, but they're going to ask you that in different ways of how you can explain what you know, instead of just sounding like you're an encyclopedia.
Yeah.
And then oftentimes, not just with TI, but with other companies, the second half of the interview will be more like written, where maybe they'll give you or they'll show you with EE, they'll show you like a circuit, and they'll ask you to find the current at a specific node. So that's
Yeah.
something that you learn your late second year, early third year, middle of your third year of college. Um, you have to be able to apply those principles. Then there's other things they could ask you, like, if we show you if we show you this system, are you able to find what the equivalent capacitance is or something like that? And we have
Mhm.
different rules and equations that can make it easy,
Yeah.
which obviously you can use to your advantage. But even if you use one of those rules that makes it easy, they still want to see you go through the process to know
Yeah.
like what you're talking about. Because similar to what I was saying earlier, they don't want you to just be regurgitating information. Because everybody, we can all look up a formula online and solve
Yeah.
most of our problems. Um, and that you do that in the workplace too. You look things up online. Ultimately, they want to see that you're able to apply yourself and that you're able to work hard.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think that one that gets a lot of students in terms of a lot of employees in terms of when they do interviews is number one, like you said, make sure you understand what you put on your resume, right? Some people would say, "Oh, I've dealt with RF before," and they might say, "Okay, in the circuit, how is RF actually produced?" Right? And that could blank out some people, right? Because normally some people might just take the RF chip and integrate into the system, but they don't know how RF is actually created. Um, and then in terms of behavioral questions, one that gets a lot of people is what is like your weakest point, right? And how do you mitigate that? A lot of interviewees um, can't really see themselves as in a negative direction, right? And that's a hard one to kind of answer. So, all
But
right,
one
so.
more thing on those
Mhm.
behavioral types of questions.
Mhm.
Um, I would recommend just looking up, just Googling different types of questions that they might ask you, and then just
Mhm.
writing down your own answer, like in a paragraph or whatever it may be,
Yes. Mhm.
leading up to these interviews, because it's like the career fair. It's like getting the interview in the first place. You need these reps of knowing already what you're gonna say. It's tough to get asked something where you feel like you're put on the spot and you have to try to figure something out within the next minute and really cram your brain about all these different situations you've been, something that could apply there. You want to be able to already kind of have like answers prepared.
Yeah.
It's just interview strategies.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah. So in terms of, and I don't know if this is, just let me know if you could talk about this, but in terms of, um, working at TI overall, what's the coolest thing you've done like personally, like you think you've done? Obviously, if there's an NDA there, then we'll skip to the next one. But just in terms of like your work, in terms of like some cool, awesome things that you've created or you've done. Hmm.
Yeah. So for me, I work in the automotive industry. The most rewarding experience I've had is being able to travel for that, to understand customer systems or show them what our portfolio is, and try to get a better view of what requirements they need so we can help develop a roadmap or develop what our next device will be, or see how our device can be implemented into their system. Because keep in mind, um, as a business lead, like I'm a product expert. So I'm also able to directly work with R&D. They show me their schematics and we're able to like go hands-on on where our solutions can actually improve their system, compared
Yeah.
to what they've been using or what they're used to using. And luckily with my products, um, we're developing new technology. We're releasing new technology over this next few months. That's exciting, and it solves problems, and that's always fun to see when you're showing a new product and you're helping uh designers or researchers for these companies figure out how our product can help them. But from this traveling experience, it's not just visiting designers to understand their system and understand how we can help them, but it's also being able to go to different parts of the world. So last year, the one that really stuck out to me the most is I got to go to South Korea and I got to go to China,
Nice. Nice.
different parts of China. But it was a 2 week period where I was in South Korea for about 3 days, and then I went to Shanghai, and then I went to Shenzhen. And
Nice.
if you haven't been overseas, especially to Asia, it's a very different world. I mean, just traveling in general, it's really puts everything into the bigger picture of um we're kind of in a bubble here in the US, and people live
Mm,
their lives so differently. I remember in South Korea and Seoul. So living here in the Bay, I grew my favorite food became Korean barbecue. So I was very excited to go to South
yeah.
Korea. And over there,
Nice.
the Korean barbecue is all like $10. Whereas
I
here it's
see.
like 30, $40. But over there you
Yeah.
can eat it every day. It's like regular barbecue. It's awesome. But Seoul, the best way that I could compare it is it was like going to New York, but
Mm.
everything was clean and everybody was dressed like
Yeah.
they were like Prada models or
Mm.
like like fashion icons. It was an interesting experience. And then on the other hand, when I went to China, also in Seoul, everybody was so nice. But when I went to
Mm.
China, I didn't know what to expect because you hear everything going on from the political landscape, like the US does not get along with China, but that's not anything like my experience that was there. Everybody
Mm.
that I talked to um, was very curious or interested in me being American, and we would be able
Yeah.
to communicate just over our different experiences. People that grew up in China, they had to learn Chinese growing up, and a lot of the times they don't get to really put it into practice. It's kind of like when we grow up and you're in high school, you have to or college, and you have to take 2 or 3 years of a foreign language. It's kind of similar to that.
Yeah.
Um, but in China, they get really excited because it's to them learning English, it's like us learning Mandarin,
Yeah.
very difficult. So when they
Hmm.
meet somebody that speaks something, when they meet somebody that does something that they recognize is challenging or difficult, um, it automatically like there's this level of camaraderie between you and the Chinese people. So even when we were talking, we visited different automotive car makers and tier one companies. Um, it was just an eye-opening experience just in general. Even the
Nice.
if you didn't know, in China you can't use uh regular apps on your phone. Everybody there uses this one app called WeChat, and that's what everyone uses to pay. Everyone uses to communicate with each other. It's almost like WhatsApp but on steroids.
Mm.
Um, Google Maps is on there. Well, it's not Google Maps, but it's a different version of Maps. It's how you call
Yeah.
your Ubers. It's where everything is. It's almost like a OS built into just an app, like a new OS for your phone.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so
Interesting.
traveling has been my favorite experience for being able to see different cultures and also for being able to go inside these different automotive companies and learn about new products that are coming out years down the line that other people don't know about, and just seeing all the cool new stuff that these companies have in store. It's all been very cool.
Okay. Nice. Nice. And then so I got two more questions for you. So then in terms of that, piggybacking off that, what's the hardest part about working at TI?
The hardest part isn't necessarily something about TI. It's
Mm-hmm.
that I live so far from my family. So I was born in Colombia, and then a few years later, I moved to Florida. And the people that live in Florida is just my parents, my aunt, and my uncle. But the majority of my family is in Colombia. But still,
Mm-hmm.
Florida and Colombia are still pretty close. So if we wanted to visit, we can see each other pretty easily just with one plane flight. Whereas like
Mm-hmm.
here, it's not as easy. Or even in Florida, like my uncle and my aunt, they lived a couple hours away, but we were able to see them consistently. Living here in the
Mm-hmm.
Bay, I'm so far, not just from my family, but also from all my close friends.
Yeah.
Um, we're in different time zones. trying to keep up with everybody and communicate with everyone has been challenging. And I don't get to see my parents or see my family or my friends as often as I would like. Um, but ultimately, it's what I asked for because if for engineering, this is the place to be.
Yeah.
And we still keep up like pretty well. Everybody that
Mhm.
I'm close with, I'm still really close with, um, including my parents. And yeah, so that's been the most challenging part being with TI. It's just moving across the country.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely think that that's one of the hardest things about following your dreams or your passion is sometimes you have to like move away from family, unfortunately. But in the long run, it's to better your career path and your future. So that's cool. Um, and then last question I have for you is any words of wisdom for like aspiring engineers that you want to put out there and just yeah, any words of wisdom?
There's so much I could say. I think ultimately, um, let's say do what you want to do. So if you want to be a hardware engineer, if you aspire to be a hardware manager or a product manager or work in C-level or start your own company, you have to take all the necessary steps to get to what you want to do. So it's not just like do what you want to do, like don't let other people limit you from doing what you really desire. I'm talking about more specifically like putting in the work for what you desire. If you're not willing to put in
100%.
the work, do you really want it? And it's not like you want it. It has to get to a point where you need it. If you don't feel like you need it, you're not gonna want to put in the work, and it's not gonna feel rewarding. Um, so yeah, and that's something that you can take from doing it in school. Like even if you want to get good grades, you can apply in your career. You can apply it in your relationships outside of your career.
Nice. Yeah. Do what you want to do. All right. Nice.
Hmm.
All right. Appreciate you so much, Juan. Thank you for joining. Yeah. Let me just
Yeah, sounds good. Appreciate you having me on, Diva.
yep.